What is up, my friends? It is good to see you. This video is a little bit different than some of the other ones we've done in the past. There is a different perspective on what I'm doing here, in that usually I have you facing the other direction in this room. This is actually going to be my second take at doing this video because I filmed the entire thing. I went through it, I did my whole process that I normally do. And for some reason, the audio was all sorts of messed up, so I couldn't use the footage. And now it is late on Sunday evening, and I wanted to get a video out, so I'm going to do it, but it's not going to necessarily have the same production value that it normally does, or that I attempt to put forth in my videos. With that being said, we're going to take a look at a new strength training routine this week, somebody within the realm of combat sports who is utilizing kettlebells to prepare for their next fight, which just so happens to be next weekend. Today we're looking at the strength training routine of one of the biggest superstars in the sport, somebody who is at the top of the game, the UFC middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya. Israel has a rematch with Robert Whittaker next weekend. He's going to be defending his title in what should be an amazing fight. Their first fight ended maybe a little prematurely, in that a lot of people thought it was going to be more competitive than it was. But I think having this fight be a rematch and having there been adequate time for both these guys to prepare, I think it's going to be a pretty good fight this weekend. So you can play back this footage and tell me if I'm right or wrong in about a week's time, but that's my premonition and thought. And it's a fight I'm really excited for. So today, I scoured the internet. I tried to find as much footage as I could of Israel training with kettlebells, and I found a few short clips in which we're going to break down today. And it's not as lengthy as what I would normally do, but I think there's still some value to be had in that we're looking at least one exercise that we haven't looked at before, and I'll give you my thoughts on that one exercise. So without further ado, let's take a look at Israel Adesanya's strength training routine using kettlebells. So the first exercise we're doing here, we're looking at kettlebell cleans. The screen is behind me here as opposed to the side, so that's why I'm looking in this direction if you're curious. He's doing cleans. We've seen a lot of people doing cleans in our videos. We looked at it last week when we were looking at Holly Holm performing this same exercise. I don't want to rehash all of the same points that I made last week. So what I want to talk about with regards to his clean technique is less so his arm position in the front rack, because we see that there are some errors there. More so his technique with regards to the power he's generating with the exercise. So kettlebell clean, ballistic exercise, right? It's a powerful movement. It's a full body movement. You've heard me say these things before. Israel is making it an arm dominant movement. So he's pulling with his arm up into that front rack position, and he's almost doing it like the shoulder, a lat, or a biceps exercise, as opposed to posterior chain, core, and then those muscles as an accessory. So when you're performing this movement, the power generated for the upswing should be posterior chain. You're driving through the heels, extending the hips, squeezing those glutes. That should be driving the bell. And then your arm is directing the trajectory of the bell to get it to move more vertically as opposed to horizontally. So when we look at him doing this, he's not using his hips at all. He's just pulling with his arms. So I would like to see him go deeper into that hip hinge as if you were performing a swing to generate that power, and then use that arm to direct that bell, tame the arc, keep it close to his body, and arrive in that front rack position. The next exercise harkens back to the days of Arnold Schwarzenegger doing some bodybuilding. We are looking at a traditional, maybe a not so traditional biceps curl. And I want to talk about this exercise a little bit more at length, not so much the technique of it, but the why. Why would you do a biceps curl if you're a combat sports athlete? Initially, my initial reaction is to be slightly appalled when it comes to a biceps curl. Somebody that's a little bit more functional minded in their training, a biceps curl is like keep it away. Let's not do that. But when I think about it in a little bit more detail, and I've explored these thoughts in the development of our programming over at Momentum WOD, for combat sports, this actually is not the worst exercise you could be doing for two reasons. One, you're building grip strength. And two, when you're applying submissions, not only is that grip strength going to be relevant, but the squeeze that you develop in that biceps, in that forearms, those muscles, both of your biceps, your brachioradialis, your forearm musculature, those are going to be relevant for having a strong squeeze when you're applying submissions like a rear naked choke. So I wouldn't make a biceps curl the cornerstone of my upper body strength training for combat sports, but I think it's a fine exercise if you want to include it from time to time to either warm up that musculature or just add some variety to your training every once in a while. I like the way Israel's doing it, where he's doing it with a towel, which is going to further test his grip strength. The one detail that I would change about the way he's doing it is I would emphasize the negative portion of the exercise so you can build more muscular endurance, because we know when you're applying that squeeze, it's not only how hard can you apply it, but how long can you apply it. So emphasizing that negative portion of the exercise, I think there's a lot of value in doing that as well. So biceps curls, initially, I'm a little taken aback by them, but when you think about it in more detail, in more depth, it makes a little bit more sense, especially if you're training in a gi. Personally, when I'm performing this exercise, I do it maybe once a month, but I'll do it as a warm-up to a more ballistic pulling movement or a more powerful pulling movement. And I'll also combine it with other movements, meaning I'll perform a halo first and then go into a hammer curl from there, just to add a little bit more depth to the movement, make it a little bit more dynamic, and incorporate more muscle groups into the performance of it. So don't hate it. I don't love it. Somewhere in between, but I think it's fine to be performing if you're a combat sport athlete. And of course, Israel is going to give us the flex at the end, letting us know he's got the 22s. $1 million smile. Looking good, Israel. So the last exercise, we get like 1 rep out of it. These were literally the only clips I could find of him training with kettlebells. He's wrapping some mob deep to start off with, and then we're going into a squat thruster. His thruster is fine. It's a momentum-driven movement, so he's using his momentum to power the kettlebell into that overhead position. He's applying that momentum in a specific instance to emphasize what you're trying to get out of the exercise. But 2 things that I will critique out of this 1 rep we're looking at, which once again, it doesn't really give us much. Once again, front rack position, his arm is out. He's supporting the bell more so on his shoulder than utilizing his lat to stabilize that position. So I would make that little change, tighten that up a little bit more. That will force your core to work a little bit more. Everything proximal to the midline of your body as opposed to distal. Those proximal elements are going to have more to do with your performance, more to do with your power than those elements that are farther away from your body. The second thing, which initially when I did this reaction video, I did not include, but somebody who provided me with a little bit of feedback when they watched the video as well, said, hey, you never talk about this. Why don't you include this in your video? So I'm going to include it. The dismount, the bringing the kettlebell back down to the ground. Notice, gets to the shoulder, then he just kind of flips it down. I want you to treat the way you put the bell down with the same respect as the way you pick the bell up, meaning you should be mindful of your biomechanics and your technique when you're doing so. Pass it through your legs the same way you would with a hike, and then bring it back down to the ground with a neutral spine. So Israel, once again, when we pay attention to the details, there are little points when we're strength training where we can put ourselves at more risk for injury than we need to. This would be one of those instances. So get the bell off the ground with respect, put it back down with respect. You will be safer and more effective as a result of that. So with him putting the bell down, that does it. We got 3 exercises out of his strength training routine. It wasn't much today, but I think it was good to see some of the things that he's doing in preparation for his fights at UFC 271 next weekend. I wanted to include somebody in the main event in today's video, which is why I chose these clips for today. And I hope there's been at least some value that you've gathered out of this brief interaction that we've had. I like the fact that we got to talk about biceps curls. It's an exercise that I think gets overlooked and still provides some value if it's something you wanted to do from time to time to not only look good, but perform a little bit better as well. I think there's, like I said, some applications for it in a widespread strength training routine, especially if you're in the gi. But don't forget to be mindful of that negative portion of the exercise. With that being said, before I close out for the day, I want to encourage you, make sure you head over to momentumwod.com. We have a free 7-day trial of kettlebell performance training for combat sports, for jiu-jitsu. You can take advantage of it. Hundreds of workouts, literally hundreds of kettlebell workouts, and we have about 75 different exercises that you can access to learn the technique to be able to perform those workouts correctly and safely. And you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. Further, we have a premium subscription that gives you access to all of those same things indefinitely, plus 5 new workouts every single week, which is now $40 off, the lowest price we've ever had for the subscription. But this offer will not last forever, so if you're interested, make sure you head over there, take advantage. The promo code is in the description below. I'll leave the link in the description below to go sign up if you're interested. And like I mentioned, you have access to me if you want it. With that being said, my name is Dr. Brandon Osborne. I am signing off for the day. I have enjoyed doing this. I'm sorry if the quality is not what it usually is. Doing my best here. Hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win next week on UFC 271? It has been real, my friends. I will see you then. Take care.